Women who left a rich guy. Why did you do it? First, it was fun not having to worry about anything. He let me drive his cars, his boat, and gave me money to spend each month, and took me to great places. He seemed to sincerely trust me, which made me like him. Then at the end of the year, credit statements came in and he sat me down with a credit card that I had been allowed to use. Mind you, I never asked for these things, but I didn't say no when they were offered. Because I didn't grow up rich. I was very conscious about spending. He even complimented my very basic needs in comparison to other women. He questioned every charge in the credit card, even things he had asked me to buy for him because he didn't have time to shop for it. One item stuck out to me in particular. I made a $5 purchase at a gas station, then immediately after a purchase for a gas at Costco, he asked me what the $5 was. I honestly couldn't remember. I don't eat candy. I constantly have a water bottle with me, so I didn't stop for any of those things. And it was exactly $5. Then I remembered. That particular day had fumes in my gas tank. I didn't have enough to reach Costco. Rather than fill up my car with expensive gas station gas, I put $5 in to get me to Costco and then filled up my tank. I knew right then and there I would be defending things for the rest of my life. Trusting me and complimenting my frugal purchases was all BS. I couldn't live that way. He's got more trust issues than a paranoid squirrel. Maybe he should try therapy or something. Story 2. We were long distance and I was so infuriated with this guy. Going as far as uprooting my whole life to move to another country. I didn't tell him about my plans because I wanted to be able to stand on my own. While in the process of looking for an apartment or job in his city, the lockdown hit. A month passed and he wrote me a heartfelt letter breaking it off. I was so sad for like a month. By chance, a girl was suggested on my Facebook. Turns out it's his new girl. I went back to old texts and just thought of convos we had. So many ignored red flags. I would go as far as being thankful for the clean cut the lockdown gave me. Story 3. He wanted me to leave college, leave the country, and marry him. He was obsessed with my purity. He refused to kiss me to preserve our marital night of bliss. He often told me he loved me because I was trainable and he could guide and mold me. After 3 weeks of dating, he proposed. The diamond was massive. He showed me what would be my new home. He still owns the property and car with a driver. He had already purchased jewelry and chosen a few wedding dresses. It felt weird to me. He had never raised his voice or laid a hand on me, but it felt imminent. When I said no to his proposal, he immediately called me old and fat and said he would find a young, beautiful wife. I still shudder to think about that last sentence. I remember saying, "What are you going to do? Go to a high school?" He didn't respond. He's now even more wealthy and still alone. He's living proof that money can't buy happiness or a decent personality. Story 4. I'm a guy who left a rich guy, and it was exactly because he was a materialistic, narcissistic schmuck who's only interested in anything on a surface level, including love. I'm not saying that rich guys are generally like this. This was just my case. He was a true trust fund baby, and after 2 years of feeling like he just didn't care about me, I realized he just didn't care about anything. He collected friends if they had interesting jobs or backstories, but didn't care about them. He'd buy pets to post on his Instagram, then give them away after a few months. A few of my heirloom decorations I'd bought into our house, mostly gifts from friends and family, he'd give away to the cleaner because they didn't match the aesthetic or they didn't understand why I'd care about them. In one of our final conversations, he flat out said, "I know I'm supposed to care about you, but I don't." There wasn't even any malice in it, it was just factual. That made it very easy to just switch off my feelings in return. It was also really lazy. His dad bought a local coffee shop for him to run to try and build up some sort of work ethic, but he hated it and eventually moved back to his home country. I took the dog. Story 5. He used his wealth in spoiling me materialistically as a means to justify or compensate for his controlling and possessive behavior. That suffocated me until I left. He would take me on surprise holidays, etc., but it doesn't matter in the end if he's not treating you right on the human level. It was emotionally unintelligent, entitled, and quite narcissistic. How they treat your emotions, their character, and how they respect you as a human being ultimately matters more than money. Story 6. He kept bragging about daddy's money and that he will take over the company. It was embarrassing, and I realized I could never fall in love with him. I broke it off 3 months after he asked me to go on a 1-month cruise with him and his family, fully paid for me. I decided that it just wouldn't be right for me to go on that cruise knowing I wanted to break it off. I'm still very proud of myself for making that choice at 22. Someone who grew up poor and never even been on holiday, never mind a different country. It was my dream to travel, but it worked out well because now I get to travel due to my own hard work. Story 7. I dated a doctor who came from a very wealthy family. He grew up next door to a well-known country singer, for example. When I first met him, I finally understood what it meant to be swept off my feet. Fancy dinners, elaborate gifts, shows after shows, incredible trips. And yet I was absolutely miserable through all of it. It was constantly reminding me that I was a problem. My responses to his coldness were a problem. He isolated me from everyone, and when we got into an argument about how he shouldn't tell me when I can or can't go to the bathroom, I finally had enough. I was in therapy at that point, ironically at his request, and my therapist helped me see just what a narcissistic and controlling schmuck he was. It took me 2 times to leave him for good, because the love bombing was insane. I realized that no amount of money or prestige was worth how broken I felt inside. He needed me to be small so he could be big. Story 8. I too am a man who left a rich woman. I was in a transitional period of life working at a gas station, trying to get back on track with life. Met her through a dating site. We were together off and on for 3 years. During that time, she was always belittling me for being in my 30s and working at a gas station, while she was a college graduate and in her early 20s. It was very cruel and would hurt me often to resolve any kind of argument. The intimacy was awesome and she did have a sweet side, but it wasn't enough. She told me I was just a for-the-time-being boyfriend and had no intentions of moving forward towards marriage. Final straw is when her family accused me of going after her money. I was in a better place and valued myself enough not to take any more cruelty, so them saying that made me realize how insignificant I was in the relationship. The money was from family wealth. I never had to work hard for anything, and that was a huge disconnect that I should have realized early on, but didn't. Story 9. I dated a woman who was right about to get the peak pay with an extremely well-paid medical specialty. Every time I'd make any mistakes, she'd call me stupid. As in, I went into a bad lane where I was stuck behind some turning cars and she'd say it. She'd lock herself out of the house or leave the lights on in her car and I'd need to jumpstart her, and I just said, honey, and didn't get mad. But she'd forget the stuff and just put me down immediately if I made the slightest error. There was just a moment I realized that me being kind wasn't getting her to treat me any better. Also, she'd complain how the men in her specialist field often had wives they treated like crap or somehow junior members of the relationship. I realized that as soon as her income was higher, she'd consider my actually very, very good income some sort of character flaw. I wanted kids. She did too, and I realized she would treat me and the kids like this forever. Story 10. Dated a hedge fund dude for over a year. We lived together and were ring shopping. He said once we get married, it wouldn't work anymore. He forbids me from getting a graduate degree. I dumped him. He accused me of being a gold digger, weird and wrong. Months later, he proposed to an ex-girlfriend who was actually a gold digger who was waiting in the wings for him. He basically wanted total control over finances so he could cheat and have final say over all the family decisions. No regrets leaving him, even though he's worth millions and I've had to work harder for longer in my life. Whatevs, bruh. Can't buy my dignity. Story 11. Never had a chance to answer this, so excuse me flipping the question around. After I divorced, I dated a very well-off, mid-level exec from a telecom company for a month after my divorce. She valued her free time like it was being paid at work. Only would do things she wanted. Wouldn't text unless she wanted to. Like, if I sent her a message when she was off work, she'd ignore it half the time for half a day or more. But if she texted me and I didn't respond instantly, she'd spam me. Basically, I realized that because I wasn't making 6 figures, she considered my time to be worth nothing. She texted me out of nowhere and asked me to do something out of the way for her. Example, would you stop by Michael's and see if they have X stamps for my crafting? But I couldn't even get a response if I was trying to ask how her day was. One day, she accidentally got a taste of her own medicine. I told her I was off on a Friday to play the newly released Red Dead Redemption 2 and then played all night. Went to sleep around 7 a.m. She lost her mind because she had decided to take off at the last minute without saying anything and had me come over and hang out. After all this, I basically asked her if she could meet for coffee so I could explain, and met her and explained that she treated me like I was less important than she was. That I didn't appreciate being treated like a second-class citizen, so this would be our last time meeting up. Blocked her number and ignored every attempt at contact. She's single and still reaches out via text about every 3 or 4 months, and that was like 6 years ago. Story 12. He asked me not to move to New York to pursue a career in tech and instead stay with him and he could provide for me and spoil me and I would never have to work again. All I had to do was give him kids. I was 22 and he was 29. He was a nice guy, but he never thought about me or what I wanted. Just cared about how it would fit into his life and round out his accomplishments by being young, hot, and the mother of his kids. I said no and I moved. I never regretted it. Now I have a life and accomplishments and success and wealth that I built all by myself, for myself. And no one can ever take that away from me. I'm proud of myself. Story 13. I'm not crazy rich, but I am financially independent and take care of both of our needs and wants. We'd vacation 4 to 5 times a year and I'd get her many gifts. She and I were the same age. She came from a poor family and was unemployed at the time, but never cared about my money. I was so insecure and thought that all she liked about me, she wouldn't really compliment me, so I had nothing else going for me in my head. She had many issues in her life, and I offered an escape instead of a long-lasting solution. She would communicate this many times, but for some reason it always flew over my head. She wouldn't laugh at my jokes anymore and thought they were disgusting. She stopped initiating intimacy and would shame me for it when I asked. Eventually, we broke up because we almost never had intimacy. And there was always tension in the air from her personal stress when we hung out. Still miss her, but I guess she's happy. I am working on my shallow personality and learning how love works or how to form a genuine bond. I made my mistakes. I'm grateful for being able to reflect objectively on a relationship. Story 14. I feel like I'm in the opposite boat. Being a man with a woman who seems to clearly come from money, the money thing actually has been an issue for us. And we're still together, but it's caused problems. Disagreements on how to raise our kids mostly, if that day occurs. She wants to send the kids to private school so they don't have to be around the bad kids. Well, I think growing up in a public school with a diverse set of students and families was beneficial. But I do think it depends on the area. Also, I really am a bit frugal by nature. I've always valued friendship and adventure over money and luxury. That can cause some issues, especially while traveling. I think we're both trying to meet in the middle, but it's been a challenge. Story 15. I was 19, he was 31 at the time. He wanted to introduce me to his parents, which is a huge deal in our culture, and I knew he wanted kids eventually, which I did not, and still do not. He was really kind, sweet, generous, and patient with me, so I ended things so he could find his real love and start a family. I really respected him. Last I heard from a friend I introduced to him, he's engaged and she's age-appropriate, lol, also the same income bracket. They have a gorgeous mansion together. I'm so happy for him. Even though I'm still poor, I'm really happy I didn't take the next step with him. Money and access were great, but weren't everything. I also realized I do care about looks after all. After him, I found the love of my life and the person I want to be with forever. And he's a cutie to boot. Story 16. He got hammered, again, hurt me and trashed her friend's apartment. She was a witness to all of this, because I asked him to talk quietly on his phone call at 1 a.m. while her friend and I had gone to bed. He got arrested in the police officer's choice, and then proceeded to pester me, saying it was my fault, and then accused me of cheating on him, though he had been the one to send inappropriate messages to numerous people, as well as pictures, including my own. After I got out of there, he switched between begging me to come home and slandering me to everyone we knew. I got a no-contact order against him, which he violated, but it was dropped because I couldn't prove that I didn't confirm that he couldn't contact me. Then he violated it again by contacting my friend, my dad, my ex-husband's girlfriend, and told them that I cheated on my ex-husband. Not true. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him in over a year, so I hope that continues. He left me with crippling debt. I had to use all my savings to start over from scratch. I left there with basically nothing. And I went from a 4-bedroom house with a beautiful yard that I had worked on for 3 years to a 2-bedroom basement apartment in a crappy area where my kids and I are always tripping over each other. But it is definitely much preferable, and at least I feel reasonably safe. Story 17. I mean, we're talking a pretty big variance depending on the person here. There's people here commenting on a guy that they considered rich who made $40,000 a year. In my mind, we're talking about someone with a net worth in the decamillionaire and up range with income of at least $500,000 a year. Women will leave and they don't feel appreciated anymore. Some will stay for the economic benefit, but most, if you're unhappy, you're just unhappy, and the money won't fix that. Not if it will make you feel any better, but it's not like rich dudes have it easy. It doesn't just extend to relationships. If your wealth is known, you will have to occasionally question even friendships you have with people. The motivations of people you meet, it can be pretty depressing sometimes, and I'm not even that high on the rich scale. Story 18. I thought it was a bit sketchy and spent too much time with another girl. After we broke up, both our moms begged me to reconsider. I was a good, smart Catholic girl from a good family. in university with a promising career ahead. I said no, and that's actually when I moved away from home. Funny enough, 6 months after we broke up, he welcomed a baby with that other girl. A year later, he asked me for coffee to reconsider things. He asked me a bunch of times. His timing was awful. I always had a previous commitment for that day, and he eventually stopped asking. I'm better at saying no and being blunt now, but that took a long time to develop. Being raised to be a good Catholic girl sure messed me up. Story 19. Not me, but I used to work with one who was from Egypt and married a doctor before moving to the States. The guy bought her everything and took her everywhere, but was really cruel. When she threatened to leave him, he laughed because she was stupid, old, 40s when she left, useless and will never be anything without him. She took those words and used them as motivation. Like, don't get me wrong, this lady was dumb, but managed to work her way to management, and when I heard about her past, I was like, damn, girl, respect. Safe to say she proved him wrong as others accomplished much less with more. Story 20. We only dated a few months. He future faked nonstop, dangling carrots and shopping trips and getting massages together, but barely made time to even meet me for dinner. When we did go to dinner, he acted entitled with the staff. He tried to sleep with me on a third date, and rolled his eyes when I said I wouldn't do that until we were exclusively together. The final straw was when he aggressively insisted on flying me out to visit my family at Christmas, not understanding that I couldn't even afford the cab ride to or from the airport, that the best option was to take a bus, closer to home in both ends, so a cheaper cab there and public transit here. I was too embarrassed to explain that to him. He was just so pushy and arrogant about it all. He got angry and we mutually ghosted after that. Story 21. Trust fund rich plus built his own company rich equals egomaniac. He wanted a woman who pursued education, a high status career, and was beautiful, all because it made him look good. But also, I had to be available for his every beck and call. I wasn't allowed to prioritize anything over what he wanted. He wanted breakfast made for him by 8 a.m., but I had a morning class. It was my fault I chose a morning class, and I had to find a way back to making breakfast anyways, even if it meant sacrificing making it to the class. And because I had to be highly educated, I had to find a way to make up for that myself, or else. If I was out of the house for 15 plus hours a day for multiple days because I was working full time and had classes full time, it was still my fault if I didn't have his favorite shirt laundered and ironed for his very important meeting. Even though, as the worst part is, he'd put in his 10 to 12 hours at home as a work from home, and then the remaining waking hours he had ordered takeout for food. Even though I spent time and prepared a dinner he liked and placed it in the fridge, as he asked. Then also was 2 bottles of wine deep watching movies and had done nothing else. Nothing. So he had A, ample time to launder and iron his own shirt and any other request he demanded from me. B, wasted my time having me make him food he didn't even eat. It was all the time. I reached a cap when I told him, as partners, I'm feeling this is unbalanced and I'm struggling. And he audibly laughed at me that I even thought we were equal partners. He was in charge, and that was it. Yep, that ended right then and there for me. But I should add, I had no idea he was rich when we met. He didn't dress rich. He didn't look rich in any way, nor was I looking for a rich person. I want a life partner. Sure, I am ambitious and want to share aspirations with my partner and build wealth together, but as partners. Sure, if he has more than me going into it, great for him and his stability, but I also want to be stable financially first as an individual, and second as a partner. I have a strong sense of wants versus needs and don't struggle to discipline myself to say no to things that aren't needs. A meal at home with a walk in the neighborhood instead of an expensive meal is great. Sure, one day a nice meal somewhere fancy will be cool, maybe, but it's not a given. Anyways, he concealed his wealth for quite a while. His business was just a 9-to-5 job. He took me to average places, said yes to splitting the bill or said yes to me covering the whole thing. He only started to ask things of me as favors to help. As a loving girlfriend, I wouldn't say no to that, and it built from there. His wealth was exposed when he was talking about his friend's income, and I said something like, wow, yes, he really is doing well for himself. That's wonderful for him and his new family. His ego, I guess, couldn't take me being happy for someone else's successes. He essentially blurted out all about how well off he really is and what he's building or what he has, etc., etc. I was just happy for him, sort of noting how wonderful it must feel to be so stable. But I never changed my behavior with him. I still didn't ask for anything. I still bought him gifts and bought concert tickets for surprise dates, etc. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 22. Because he was completely insufferable. Everything in the relationship revolved around his happiness. He believed he had the right to cheat while I stayed completely monogamous to him. I didn't care about any of my interests or who I even was as a person. And it was all about me knowing him. Like he was the main and only worthy character of this planet. He also had a laundry list of things he wanted me to change, superficially. I had to lose weight despite being already thin, while he considered himself just fine with a large hairy tummy he had going on. This didn't feel like a partnership, just a spoiled man-child who needed to be the center of the world while I was just living in it. I'm so glad to be out. Never ever again. And the intimacy was terrible. Story 23. He was never happy and incredibly insecure. He had money to buy whatever he wanted and worked hard for it, but he had a horrible relationship with his family, friends, and past girlfriends due to his insecurities in himself. No matter what he did to work on himself, he still couldn't find happiness. This resulted in him putting me on a pedestal, and it felt like, in return, I wasn't being challenged. I have no hard feelings towards him to this day, but it really taught me that regardless of money and freedom, it does not buy happiness. You have to be happy with yourself first. I also felt like because of his insecurities, I couldn't connect to him. I would like to consider myself a secure person, so I felt like I was constantly needing to validate him, and it was exhausting. Story 24. I dated a few men with money. I was pretty in my youth. And I ended most of those relationships because either something was really off with them emotionally or they were just a schmuck. One, I'm pretty sure, had been mistreated as a child. He was a very broken person, but not ready to deal with his issues, which is sad. I think that for some men, working obsessively is a way to mask emotional pain. My most memorable breakup was with an orthopedic surgeon resident with an anger management problem. We were on a mini break together, and he was screaming and dangling my suitcase off the balcony. I had a weird clarity about how I needed to end this in a way that I didn't end up physically hurt, because clearly he was not a safe person, and yet all his future earnings. We tried to get back together later. You shouldn't marry a man who dangles your suitcase off a balcony. That's a clear sign it ain't going to work. Story 25. He was extremely emotionally codependent, which was exhausting to deal with 24/7. I felt exhausted and drained by every interaction we had. To top it all off, he indicated that he never wanted to get married or have children because he was afraid of having to share his wealth. So, essentially, the relationship had no long-term future. And I told him I didn't want to be with him because of the reasons above. He tried to tell me that I was crazy and wanted to take me to see his therapist to try to convince me to change my mind about being in a relationship with him. Lol. 10 years later, and he's still alone and wondering why women keep leaving him after a few months. On the surface, he seems like a catch, but once you peel the layers of the onion off, it was more like catch and release. Story 26. The fact he was rich was of no relevance to either the beginning or the end of the relationship. I didn't know he was rich until a few months in. Never flaunted it. Was not materialistic, not a spoiled brat. Had no problematic behavior tied to his money, and I simply didn't care either way. The relationship ended for reasons entirely disconnected from his or my financial situation. We had different priorities at that stage in our lives, and ultimately just didn't match. He was very recently divorced with young kids, and that wasn't right for me at the time. Plus, we never found enough emotional common ground. Many women don't stay for money, no matter how much certain people would like to convince themselves otherwise. Money has never been a factor for me. I'm not rich at all, but I make a good living and have dated men with less money than I have, and others with much, much more. The former tends to be a bigger issue, for the men, that is. Story 27. I dated two guys from families with money. One was so boring and wasn't even funny. My grandmother almost terminated me when I ended it. She married for money 2 times, both passed away, and went on to date 3 very rich men. All 3 passed away. I'll let readers make their own inferences. The second guy seemed decent. We had a lot of fun together. I applied to one grad school post first degree. I really wanted a year off, but I decided to try my luck with a big deal school. I was mildly disappointed when I didn't get in, and his response was, "I don't know why you bother. You'll get to stay home with the kids, so don't waste money on school." Guys putting their beliefs, goals, dreams before mine and completely diminishing my goals and dreams was the number 1 reason for all of my breakups. Number 2 reason, getting the ick. I didn't meet my husband till my 30s, and I was absolutely in the mental space of I ain't changing for no one. You fit in my life or you don't. Funnily enough, my husband had the same perspective. And we fit. Story 28. I wasn't happy. He always uses money to make up for things he disappoints me in, or he uses money for the affection I long for from him. I felt it wasn't a priority. I felt as though I was used to waste time or entertaining him, and also his mom didn't like me despite being with him for 2 years. She always tells him to look for Chinese girls to date. They were American Chinese. At one point, I was already begging for him to spend time on me. He would have time to spend in his cab, but he never had time for me. I felt so low compared to a cat. He can spare time for his online friends, but never for me. He had money to fly to me, but I had to wait till his business work was wrapped out. Then he didn't want to make me his girlfriend who we met, but never exerted the effort to see me to make it official. I was just drained out from understanding and giving the benefit of the doubt. It felt like a transactional relationship. He only loves me when it is convenient for him. I was 80% sad and 20% happy for his minimal attention to me. I knew then I can't marry this man who has no emotional intelligence. So I left. It hurt like hell because I didn't care anymore once I left. I was an outsider. Maybe he never really loved me. It was just convenient to waste his loneliness. Story 29. A woman leaving a rich dude will leave for the same reason any other woman leaves a relationship. It isn't working out. Most women don't chase money. That's a weird obsession the internet seems to believe. In 98% of marriages, both spouses work full-time, and in 60% of marriages, the women are the breadwinner. They're gold-digging men and women alike. Lots of men are looking for a woman to support them while they play video games and drink with the boys. I have personally experienced it, along with having friends with dudes like that. They always work just long enough until you move in or get married, then the job disappears and, oops, I can't find anything else no matter how hard I try. While clearly not trying and spending all day and night gaming or gambling online. And there are women that do the same. So, people chasing money specifically are usually users who don't care if there is no emotional connection. They just want to use someone, and if booted, will move on to someone else to use. Story 30. Unhealthy attachment to his mother. Present something as a gift, then later ask me to pay him back or complain bitterly about the money he spent. Ask me to move in with him, then refuse to give me a key to the house. I finally left the day he grabbed me during an argument and threw my phone against the wall. It wasn't even his money. It was his dad's business and property he was set to inherit. His mom had a drinking problem and she let her dogs make a mess on the kitchen floor of their nice house. They were always really kind to me, at least. He thought he was going to move into their house with his mom after his dad passed away, but he got a bad surprise when his mom moved her lover in instead. I never cared about the money. If anything, it caused more problems than it solved. I just wanted him to be happy, but he never was. Story 31. Rich-ish guy, who's now 10 years later, rich. I left him because I didn't fit the life he knew he wanted. His path has always been clear for him. Go to a reputable college, get some experience in a large company in the same field his family was in, and eventually help manage their family business. Probably eventually move into their 200-year-old manor with his parents retired. That path has sort of been set out by his family, but he truly wanted to follow it too. There was very little freedom for us to explore something else, like living abroad, living in the city, or even following him to where my career was taking me. I didn't want so much commitment when what I got in return was a loving partner, which, yes, lovely, but I ended up meeting someone else after the breakup who's just as lovely. And some luxury items, vacations, and lifestyle which I don't particularly care about. It wasn't worth my freedom, to be honest. We still meet from time to time. My partner and I attended his wedding, etc., so no harsh feelings. But his and my visions for life just didn't fit. Story 32. A man I dated came from a wealthy family in Atlanta. He was first generation after the money came in, had a sizable trust fund, and was successful in his own right. I didn't leave him for any interesting reason. He was just sort of immature. And my friends didn't like him because he would occasionally say inappropriate things. Not that he was super offensive or anything. He was just kind of awkward and unfairly sociable. He was a nice enough guy, but it didn't feel like a good match personality-wise. Money helps, but it isn't everything. And ultimately, the small, everyday experience you have with someone amounts to your life. I'd rather be middle class with someone I genuinely love being around than super wealthy with someone who I wasn't crazy about. Story 33. He was boring. Nice enough guy. He was a premiership footballer and I was 18. It was in the days when footballers were starting to get mega money and were constantly in the papers for their debauchery and wild lifestyles. The media stereotype was wildly inaccurate. He'd be in bed by 9 p.m. and up and out for training at 6 a.m. Didn't drink, didn't go out at the weekends, and was just overall being very mature, responsible, and doing everything he should to keep his career at top level, which is absolutely what he should have done. I didn't want to be settled down and got very bored of the lifestyle he led. The money in Big House wasn't any consolation for not having the experiences I felt I was missing. I just wanted to go clubbing, drinking, and live my best 18-year-old life like all of my friends were doing. 18-year-old me had absolutely no common sense whatsoever, but I still had no regrets about ending things. The relationship likely would have fizzled out on its own soon enough anyway. We had very little in common and were too young for it to be serious. You know, some people would do anything for that kind of lifestyle, but hey, more power to her for wanting to party all night. Story 34. Because he was narcissistic and emotionally numb, let alone emotionally unavailable, as an empath, it was difficult for me to be with someone who was not capable of feeling. Oh, and he was rich until it came to spending on us. I used to pay for almost everything. I didn't really mind because being the only breadwinner in my family, this stuff is now natural to me. But I felt I'm being taken advantage of, emotionally as well as financially, and at times physically. He, however, was on his way to making it big in life, and I rooted for him and still do, but he failed to realize it wasn't the money that women are after. It's your love that we crave. That's like the bare minimum. He claimed he loved me, still does, but I never really felt it. I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to be with someone else, but I'm sure I'm never going back to that robot of a human again. Story 35. He wasn't rich, per se, but he made about $40,000 a year while I was making $20,000 a year, so double my income. Rich in comparison to myself. I ended the relationship because that selfish man was actually stealing from me. About $15,000 in total. We ran a cleaning business together. That didn't include the cleaning income and our full-time income. The cleaning was a separate thing we both worked on. But the money was deposited to his accounts, not joint. He kept all of that money for himself for about a year and a half of working together on it. There were a lot more reasons I ended things, but the stealing was a major reason. He made so much more than me and was so financially cruel, it's sickening. When we broke up, he dropped the cleaning on my shoulders. We still had about a month left of the contracts and had agreed to split the work separately, but the next day he said he was out completely. So I picked up the business myself. Got everything legal and ran the business solely for about another 3-ish years. Story 36. He became simply annoying. Very practical, always in action, doing something, repairing, organizing. Just like Duracell. No, he wasn't that way before marriage. He could sit and watch a movie with me or just do a long walk. We went to theaters, etc. After the marriage, in the very first week, he even got rid of his recliner in the living room and chair in the kitchen because he was always either in movement or at work or sleeping. He even ate while walking and dusting and washing the floor at the same time. During our 2.5 years of marriage, I saw him sitting only on a plane and in a car. At the birthday table? No, he was walking around it. In the cinema? No, standing by the wall and occasionally doing squats. Only times I could talk to him were in the car when we drove somewhere. And then mainly, he agreed to talk about his business, money, or chores we had to do at home. It was pure gold, doing just everything at home plus bringing a lot of money. For me, he finally got on my nerves too much. And for his next wife until she got annoyed, and then was pure gold for his next wife until she got annoyed, and then for the third wife after me. No ADHD or anything. Went to 2 psychiatrists. Just over-energetic, sporty, active in household chores. So he described his behavior. Story 37. A year or so before I started dating the rich guy, I was with someone I loved deeply, and he suddenly passed away. I didn't get therapy and was a mess, like bad. The rich guy was the first person I dated after this, and I wasn't ready to be in a relationship at all. What drew me to him was that he was in app development. My then boyfriend was a programmer. In my head, being with tech people was what was right to keep the flame going. It's hard to explain. Anyways, the rich guy wasn't very nice to me. He kept putting me down. He wasn't born with money, but he was rich to me. However, he was obsessed with appearing wealthier than he was, and I didn't fit that mold. He hated my hair, my makeup, my clothes, my friends, my family. It wasn't like that at first, only after he sold his company that made this app. Then he started changing slowly. His idea of a fun weekend was driving by rich mansions and talking about them. He was obsessed with joining this rich people club that cost a stupid amount to join. He loved to go eat at Nobu, but nurse a drink and one a la carte rolling during the off hours so it was easy to get in. He'd sort of used me a bunch, like ditching me with his dog to take a trip without prior knowledge and refusing to add me to any socials, making comments like he'd never marry a girl like me without family connections. Eventually, it all just got too much. And me being messed up instead of ending it, I started lashing out and drinking a lot until it all imploded. I feel bad for not just being mature. And looking back, I feel sorry for being with anyone during that time. I think at the time we were both just using each other to not be lonely, but clearly weren't compatible. Story 38. I dated a billionaire for a while. We're talking about one of the top 50 richest families in Forbes. It was actually quite different from most of his family, as he was against what made them all their money and he worked outside of the family business. We met on a Southwest flight, if that tells you anything. He was deeply unhappy. Didn't really like his family and was constantly complaining about his brother's wife. He was the third one. The next wife is always worse than the one before her. He also suffered from childhood trauma that I don't feel comfortable sharing here. I tried to encourage him to go to therapy, but he wouldn't do it. It was emotionally draining as I felt that I took on the role of a therapist. I was quite a bit younger than him. I also felt a little strange dating him because we would go to New York City and he would take me to Barney's and get me anything I wanted. It felt very materialistic. I had a Maybach pick me up at the airport. We stayed at the Ritz-Carlton and used a concierge for everything. He wanted to take me on all kinds of vacations. I felt that people were judging me and thought I was only with him because of the money. I don't know. I was in my head a lot about it. I also come from a middle-class family and have to work to live, so I couldn't take a bunch of PTO to go on all these vacations and getaways. That was also a disconnect. He was a nice guy, just had some deeply rooted issues. And I couldn't get the idea out of my head that I was being judged by everyone. Story 39. I have experienced this from the perspective of the opposite gender asked in the question. Her dad owned franchises of an insurance company. I was set up by my rich friends. She was a total spoiled one, and not the cute kind. The first day was a wedding of said rich friends. I was set in one of the most beautiful Texas ranch properties. I had hopes of it being romantic. I had planned on leaving for this big ranch wedding an hour earlier than we needed, but because of circumstances I couldn't control, I was going to be 15 minutes late. I called her on the way over and she was mad. So much so I almost told her to go on her own. But I thought to just let it go. On the long ride over there, she kept bragging about how smart she was and how rich they were. It was cringe. But I still thought to just ride this out because maybe we could find common ground. As the night went on, this would not change. Her cognitive dissonance was so strong she could not be challenged on anything. This led to several small arguments, which included her telling me that if I'm going to date her, that I'm going to have to see things her way or it would not work. At that moment, I realized that it was a big hell no for me. But I was gentlemanly the whole time. We finally made it back to her house and she was a bit suggestive of us fooling around. She led me to a big, heated underground pool. But I noped the hell out and ghosted her. Because I'm still single 3 years later, I still kind of wonder if I could have made it work with her. But I always realized that it would have been just for the money and not for love. So, no regrets. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.